So as of November 2022, you no longer actually need a vaccine card to get into the Philippines. So it's always nice to have a vaccine card if you are vaccinated. It's like a lubricant, meaning it makes the process smoother and faster and more convenient. If you're going to be doing any inner island travel, you will not need to get those pesky negative COVID tests, i.e. the antigen or the RT-PCR test. If you are unvaccinated, you can come to the Philippines right now. You just need to get a negative antigen test, the 24-hour one, the cheaper one. And if you're doing inter-island travel, you're going to have to get the kind of annoying test, which is the 24 to 48-hour reverse transcription RT-PCR test, which costs still about $30 in the Philippines, unless you get lucky and find a cheaper price elsewhere. But if you have a vaccination card already, that's great. So again, just to reiterate, if you're staying in the Philippines longer than 12 months, it's great to have that vaccine card. If you have that, it's gonna make your everything smooth here, getting in and out of the country or inter-island travel, not having to get those tests every time you want to go somewhere or go inside certain places that still require the vaccine card. So if you're an unvaccinated foreigner, then there might be some things you cannot do, but mostly you can get a negative COVID test like 95% of the time to replace or act as a substitute to the vaccine card. And that's also a benefit as well. So next thing is a driver's license. If you're gonna be in the Philippines long term, I highly recommend you get a legitimate, authentic driver's license that you go through the short little course, you go through the short little test, and you pay their fee and get a legitimate driver's license just so you have the option to feel peace of mind when you're renting a motorbike or if you purchase a car or a motorbike in this country. So makes perfect sense to do so. Next thing I recommend you do if you're going to be staying in the Philippines longer than 12 months, rather than get a tourism visa, which you absolutely can do. A tourism visa is cheap to maintain, meaning you can keep renewing your tourism visa up to 36 months, especially if you're coming from the United States in this example. And after 36 months, you just leave and then come back and you can restart the process over again. Why would you want a local bank account? Well, if you're gonna be living in a country longer than 12 months, it's just really easy to have a local bank account because a lot of the people, the landlords, prefer you to have post-dated checks, which you can only get if you have a local bank account, right? So getting your driver's license here, a local bank account here, getting an upgraded visa, having the vaccine card, those are the top 4 things that are gonna act as huge convenience boosters if you have the ability to have those 4 things. So another thing about having a local bank account is it makes it easier, of course, just to simply rent apartments. It's just more convenience because every landlord is gonna pretty much want those post-dated checks if possible, and you can always negotiate through that process, and it's gonna be more bumpy, less smooth, and more annoying and less convenient if you don't have the local bank account, okay? The other option is if you ever wanna buy or invest in a condo here as a foreigner, and you're gonna need a local bank account to do that, and you're also gonna want to probably not pay cash because the condos in Manila are getting more and more expensive. So the cheapest condos in Manila right now, and I'm talking like the cheapest, are probably gonna be like $20,000 to like $25,000 going on $30,000. And again, the prices are appreciating pretty rapidly, even for the super small 200, 300 square feet studios here. If you ever want to buy one for an Airbnb purposes to have long-term cash flow, which is a great idea, by the way, if you know what you're doing. But and also if you've done all the prerequisite work, which I've been talking about in this video, having these other things in place. Gaining access to Gcash and PayMaya, those are 2 payment apps that are just super nice to have as flex options, which means a backup option, or even it could be your primary option. If you forget your debit card or forget your credit card, you can always pay with PayMaya or Gcash. Those are accepted at a lot of official type businesses. And some of the even on-street vendors who offer food and stuff like that, if they have a cell phone, they probably have access. You can pay them through Gcash or PayMaya. It's a quick and painless process. It's basically a digital wallet where you can transfer your funds from your local Philippine bank account to this as a wallet. Then you just can pay each other very quickly and efficiently with QR codes. Word to the wise though, don't keep more than, don't keep a large balance on those wallets because sometimes they can get hacked. So don't put like, 5,000 US dollars worth of Philippines currency on there, which would be like 250,000 pesos. Don't do that. If anything, I would recommend you keep about 30,000 pesos or less on there, which is about $500 or $600 US, if you plan to use it a lot. But as far as the security concerns aside, it's a super useful app, and you can also pay your bills with it, which is another way to save you time and energy. So it's much easier to get that, for example, if you have the prerequisite things I was talking about. So, well, the upgraded visa rather, if you have like a specific different type of visa. So before you rent a condo or buy a condo in Manila, if you're anything like me, when you start to live in Manila for a long time and you get used to it, and if you look at or you tour multiple places, you might start to kind of feel like this emotional desire to buy a condo here because you'll see the opportunities because these there are legitimate facts surrounding the notion and projection rather, the trajectory of appreciation. Wow, so much language. What I'm trying to say in English is a lot of the condos that were purchased, 5 years ago, 10 years ago by investors have appreciated drastically. In fact, I've had off-camera conversations with many highly professional, reliable real estate agents here in Manila, and they've showed me actual numbers and calculations from their clients, which I can't share you names, or I can go into numbers but not names, where folks who have bought condos from 10 years ago, of course in BGC before it blew up, where like they were buying condos for $60-something thousand that are now worth hundreds of thousands of dollars today, where like some of the investors have gotten like 7x, 8x, 9x returns. And appreciation is based off of the economy, the country's gross domestic product, GDP. The appreciation is based off of how many people that are coming into the country, as far as like the more people who live in a country, the more people who are going to be doing commerce, buying and selling things, the more demand there will be for housing because there's a greater population. Those are the things that affect appreciation positively in a real estate market. Those are some of the biggest factors and reasons to think about. So if you're analyzing on investing. But anyways, let's get back into the main topic. So I'm also, if you see me looking down, I'm just acknowledging my iPad where I have some notes to make sure that I don't forget to tell you anything that's super important that you would want to know. So before you rent a condo here, understand one thing. If you're a foreigner coming to Manila and you want to rent a condo, and there's a good chance that you can negotiate to get down to a 6-month lease from the 12-month lease requirement. A lot of the listings on RentPad or Dot Property or Trova are going to say, for example, 12-month lease required, There's all these like seemingly stringent requirements. Like you need to have a vaccination card, you must commit to 12 months. Take these things with a grain of salt, because I have found that most landlords that I've dealt with or heard through the grapevine are pretty reasonable, because number one, they want to have a high quality tenant. They want to have a person, sometimes it's okay, they will rent to local Filipinos, of course, if they meet the requirements. But if you're a foreigner, sometimes they prefer to rent to foreigners, because certain foreigners they have like more income, more cash, etc., more assets. So they're seen sometimes in some cases as less of a liability of not being able to come up with rent and stuff like that. So my point is, like, for example, if you're seeing like, oh, you must be vaccinated. Well, I think most of the time, I will say this again, you can take my advice with a grain of salt, but my personal belief is that if you have a negative COVID test in place of no vaccination card, if you don't have a vaccination card because you're not vaccinated, if you get a legitimate COVID test and you're negative, there should be a very good chance that they'll be like, okay, let me check on that, and they'll come back to you and be like, okay, it's no problem, we can make that work. The next thing is a 6-month lease. If you're demonstrating that you're a quality individual who is trustworthy, they're probably going to be like, okay, we'll rent it to you for 6 months. And they probably won't even ask for a higher price. But if they just flat out say, no, we prefer to do 12 months only, but if you really like the place, just say, okay, well, can we increase the monthly rent by 10% in exchange for a 6-month lease? And that way, if it's a 30,000 peso per month place, just say, I'll offer you 33,000 a month if we can shorten it to 6 months. Why is it a good idea to do 6-month leases in the Philippines or in Manila, for example? I personally have a belief that if you're able to just commit to a smaller contract, there's less risk for you. If you, for some reason, hate moving, then go ahead and commit to 12 months if that is what works best for you. I enjoy moving, and I enjoy living in different towers and different buildings and different places in this city and in the world. I don't like being fixed into contracts. That's why I'm a huge fan of Airbnb, or at least I was a huge fan of Airbnb until their prices started going through the roof, like across the board. Like Airbnb, in my opinion, started to become kind of a ripoff, because there's hotels that are like 3-star, 4-star, 5-star that are a lot nicer, that are starting to be almost the same price as these Airbnbs. And Airbnbs, in my opinion, like you go there to save money and get a lot of value, but it depends on where you're looking. So certain places in the world, certain cities, but in Manila, the Airbnb prices are pretty high from what I've seen, especially if you want to get an Airbnb in short-term rental in BGC or Makati. They're pretty high prices, and they're not sustainable for most foreigners coming here. Most foreigners are not looking at paying $30 to $55, $70 or $100 a night for an Airbnb for something that you can rent for 6 months and get it down to like $20 a night, right? If you're willing to sign that 6-month lease and get the same apartment that was previously like $60 or $70 a night. And it's not always that big of a difference, but it kind of is lots of the time, right? So Okay, so here's some questions that are just really intelligent to ask yourself before, and to ask your realtor, but also to ask yourself before you're about to rent a condo, or also, and some of these questions are gonna be if you wanna actually invest in a condo, okay? So it's gonna kind of be both, but they're just really good questions. So first off, is there a range hood? Is there an exhaust fan that, so if you wanna cook or your tenant wants to cook, if you wanna buy and rent someplace else, is there like a reliable range hood built in the condo? If you don't identify one with your eyeballs, and if there appears to not have one, make sure you ask, because if there's not one, that's something you want to know, because then you have to find a different way to ventilate the place if they're going to be cooking, right? So just make sure you keep that in mind, which would basically involve you blowing a fan, like putting a big fan somewhere, you know, instructions and opening a window and how to get the smoke and the smell out the window, right? So yeah. So where is the fire alarm if there is one? So we live in Lincoln Tower, the Proscenium Rockwell in Makati. And we have a fire alarm that is literally directly above our cooktop and our stove, our range. And it's so annoying. It's been 3 times, it's been 3 times that the fire alarm has been tripped because some of the smoke escapes the exhaust fan and the range hood. And unfortunately, it has left us with the fire alarm going off, and it's not fun because the security staff downstairs are the only people who can disable or turn off the fire alarm. It's so loud and so it feels like your ears are gonna bleed after about 3 seconds. I'm not kidding. So every single time it's happened to myself and my girlfriend when we were cooking, it's obviously been partly our fault, but the fact that they installed it directly above the cooktop was the literal dumbest place to put it. Like seriously, I gotta be a little bit critical about it, but the fire alarm should have been shifted like much farther away, because if there's a fire in this extremely small unit, like the last thing you wanna do is put it directly above the exhaust fan or the range hood in case. Anyways, so where is the fire alarm if there is one? You want to avoid that. It's a very painful, inconvenient experience because it takes 15 minutes for that, in my experience, like for them to disable the fire alarm in this tower. It took like 10 to 15 minutes, and like we have to stand in the hallway and just wait for them to come up with their fire extinguishers. I really appreciate how much they care about our safety, but at the same time that we should be able to disable ourselves, but we can't. So ending that rant, if there is a fire alarm, where is it? That's something you want to think about for yourself, or if you're renting a place for yourself or a tenant in the future. So is there a trash chute in the condominium complex or not, in the building or not? This is super important. The first reason why this is super important is because if there's not a trash chute in the hallway that you can actually just walk down the hallway and throw your trash into a chute, this is a huge problem for you, because you're gonna have to bring your trash with you very often, okay, depending on the size of your trash can, especially if you're eating a lot of takeout food or cooking at home. It doesn't matter, your trash can is gonna get full very quickly. Probably once every 2 days you're gonna have to empty it. And you're gonna have to go all the way into the elevator. You're gonna have to wait for the elevator, go all the way down to the ground level floor, the basement floor, and then throw it in the dumpster, and then click the button and wait to go all the way back up. And it's like a 20-minute process to empty the trash every night or every other night if there's not a trash chute. And that's only part one of the major problem if your condominium complex that you're thinking about renting in or buying in to rent out to somebody else in, if it doesn't have a trash chute. So the second problem is when there's not a trash chute, a lot of the other tenants, I don't want to use the word lazy, but a lot of the other tenants you might be living with, your neighbors, they might be busy. That's a better word. They might have families and lives and jobs and obligations and etc. So their trash can pile up in their apartment, and they might only empty it twice a week or once a week. And when that trash is chilling in other apartments like yours or your neighbors, whoever is not taking the trash out, it will absolutely have the whole building infested with cockroaches. And even if your apartment is super duper duper clean, okay, it doesn't matter if someone below you or above you, okay, this is a condominium complex, to the left of you or the right of you, above you or below you, if someone else is having a bad week or a bad month and their habit is to empty the trash once a month or once a week or something, it just, you know, there's gonna be cockroaches, there's gonna be drain flies, there's gonna be all these bugs, and you can take a lot of steps in the book, even down to removing the cabinetry and the wood inside of your own apartment and making, like, you know, all tile and stone and, you know, seal all the cracks. You're still gonna have like pest issues to some degree, at least in the hallways and probably in your unit as well. And it's just, you can take that as gospel. So is there a trash chute or not? That's a powerful question to ask. And okay, not to go on a tangent, I had another thought, but maybe I'll bring that other thought back later. Okay, so point number 5, so if you're gonna be living in a more affordable condominium complex like the SMDC or DCMI developers, by the way, I love those developers and I love the buildings that they built. I'm a huge fan of DMCI buildings. They have balconies, they're airy, they're open, they're spacious. They have so many amenities, they're super affordable. You can rent for as low as 17,000 pesos in some cases in their studios, and they have a balcony, which is just nice. And the amenities, again, they have roof decks, pools, plural, you know, badminton courts, basketball courts. The only problem with these buildings, the DMCI buildings, is the elevator wait times for buildings that are more affordable are gonna be a lot higher. So a lot of families will live in these condominium complexes built that are for the mid-range, entry-level to mid-range budgets. So like, you know, these condos, some people can buy these condos under the rent-to-own schemes for $200 or $300 a month, and they can move in, move their families in once they're ready for occupancy RFO. That I just want to bring your attention. If you live on a high floor, like on the 40th floor or something, the whole building is pretty much going to be sold out or rented out for some of these condominium complexes that are easier to afford. You're gonna be waiting for the elevator to go up and down a lot longer than if you are renting in like a higher end place, for example, that has less people living in the building and less units sold and it's less rented because it's a more expensive building. To give you an example, if you lived in Uptown Ritz versus one Uptown in BGC, Uptown Ritz, you're gonna wait like probably 2 seconds to get an elevator. I would assume if you're in one Uptown, you're gonna wait a lot longer to go up and down for elevator versus if you're in the Lincoln Tower at Rockwell, which is where I am, we don't wait very long to go up and down in the elevators, but every time I toured a DMCI project and we wanted to go up and down, I kid you not, like every 2 to 3 floors, we pick somebody up, man. I was on the elevator for like 25 minutes trying to get to the roof deck on a tour one day on the DMCI project. So I love DMCI projects. They are more affordable, which is a great value proposition for buying and renting out and getting a higher cash flow for an investor's perspective. But if you're gonna be living in one of those places, if you're on a lower floor, that's good because you have stairs as an option if you don't wanna wait for the elevator. So very long rant regarding elevator waiting, but you might not think it's a big deal until you're in the actual situation and you're in the hallway and it's not air conditioning and you're hot. And then the elevators are not, again, air conditioned with DMCI, but they are with Rockwell for Lincoln Tower, for example. And again, AC is unnecessary, and that'll bring me to my next set of points, but just, you know, bear that in mind. The next point to ask is how hard is it to enter and exit to get picked up for ride shares? If you're someone like me who uses Grabs, which is basically Uber for Philippines, like all the time, how hard is it to get picked up or dropped off at your condominium complex? Because some condominium complexes are built way better than others with this particular piece in mind for drop-offs, okay? So the DMCI projects are generally built very, very well when it comes to pickup and drop-offs. I've noticed a lot of them have structured it very nicely. I can tell you straight up where I'm at. I'm in Rockwell, Presidium Rockwell, okay, and the Lincoln Tower. It is a pain in the butt to get my Grab rides because they always come to the ground floor because they're half the time not allowed to go up to the 4th floor, which is not a big deal because it'll take them forever to get up there anyway to meet me at the lobby, which would be nice. But I have to meet them on the ground floor, and like more than half the time when I pick up the Grab ride, what I call the Grab rides, we have to go outside onto the street from the level, and it's just a very unpleasurable experience to walk out of the building through this giant gate, down this giant ramp, all the way to the street to get in the Grab. And versus many other places, you can wait in a nice, beautiful, air-conditioned atrium, then you just step outside and your Grab guy's right there, and it's just a much more pleasurable experience while you're waiting for your ride-hailing services. So that's something to think about as well. I have listed down here how important is elevator air conditioning to you. To me, in the grand scheme of things, having air-conditioned elevators is nice, but I'm not living in the elevator, but it's just a nice little thing to have. Is it worth paying a lot more money for it? No. Is it necessary? No. But if you're in a cheaper building where it takes longer to go up and down, yeah, it's just gonna be a little bit adding to your inconvenience a little bit, but it's just something to think about. So I have here outdoor, airy, and fresh hallways or enclosed. Those are nice, but not necessary. So the DMCI projects have outdoor hallways, meaning they're not enclosed, which is great because you have fresh air, you can cool off once you get out of the elevator, catch a nice breeze, get some nice breathable, clean air, versus almost every other place is enclosed. You get onto the hallway, and the hallways are pretty much never air conditioned because it's probably just too expensive. So the hallways are never air conditioned. Very hot in Philippines, so always gonna be hot hallways. So it's nice when you have those open places like the DMCI projects. In that circumstance, you can effectively enjoy the fresh air. So that's another point to think about when you're deciding where to buy or where to rent versus DMCI versus one of the Rockwell properties or BGC properties, which there's pretty much no DMCI properties in directly the BGC area. There are some outside in southern Taguig, and there might be some in the future, but not really right now. So getting into the cost to own versus the cost to rent. Obviously, if you own a place, it's gonna cost less than if you're gonna rent it, but not much less. It's only gonna cost a little bit less if you own a condo versus if you rent it. If you obviously buy it in cash, then yes, of course, you're gonna save a ton of money. But if you have a mortgage on it, like an 80-20 split or 70-30 split, yes, you'll probably cut your rent in half. The thing about renting is you wanna rent if you don't really know how long you're gonna be in the country, or if you're still taste testing the area or the country or the place, just always rent and just get the 6-month leases and don't lock yourself in. And if you need more flexibility than a 6-month lease, then just do Airbnbs and pay a little bit more money every month, a month over month, just to have the built-in flexibility to understand if you wanna stay long-term or not. So here's how to renovate an anti-pest condo. Here's some hints on how to get rid of pests in a condo that you might have already rented or how to keep the pest at bay. So this is common sense, but here's one thing that's not common sense. Cockroaches hate cold weather. So if it's really hot and warm in your condo because you're not running the air conditioner that often and you're using the fan to save money on electricity or whatever, you're going to be more of attractive option for cockroaches and pests if you're keeping it warm. And if you keep your condo super cold, then it's less likely you're going to have those pests. They can still be there, but it's just less likely if you keep it really cold because, again, they don't like the cold. The next thing I would do personally if I was going to buy, to rent out, or live in a long time, a place, if there's a high risk building that did everything correct except like they didn't have a trash chute, so like, okay, they have higher risk of cockroaches because they don't have a trash chute in this building, but everything else is perfect for renting or whatever. What I would do is I would just remove all the cabinetry, remove all the wood. So when you're hanging the cookware or the plates or whatever, just have like floating shelves on the wall where the cabinetry was, and just don't have cabinetry. And then for the cabinetry which hides the sink or whatever, just pay a contractor to just rip all that out and put like a beautiful little covering over the sink and just rip out all the wood, basically, so everything's just floating shelves everywhere and just like a metal furnishings, like a metal bed frame, which is great, by the way, because wood is attractive to pests as well. And they also can hide in the cabinetry, but they can't hide necessarily on those floating shelves. And also you're gonna eyeball everything, and it also makes the unit look bigger. So that's what I would do as a professional landlord, thinking about how I would buy and rent out places, or buy a place myself to live in, to rent to myself, right? So that I would be a lot happier and not have to worry about pests. So here's my next point. So you're gonna wanna buy a separate fan. I have an IMAR Flex. The reason I have a fan is to ventilate bad air that's gonna be brought into your condo more than likely, especially if you're in the Bacardi area. It doesn't really matter which area you're in. If you're running the air conditioner unit constantly because you need to, basically because it's so hot in this country, which I'm not complaining, I like hot weather, but I'm just saying you need to run the air conditioning unit. So it's gonna bring in some bad air, so it's always a good idea to have a separate external fan and open the window. You can blow the fan on so you can get rid of bad foul smells that are inevitably probably gonna come into your condo unit from running the air con. You don't wanna be breathing in that bad air, so blow it out with the fan, and also if you're cooking, blow that out of the window as well. So invest in an external fan. I recommend IMAR Flex. Next point I got for you is invest in a good air purifier that has an 8-hour auto timer for when you sleep. I have a dowel. I bought it for, I think, 8,900 pesos, which is just shy of $200. And yeah, it has a timer on there and has settings. I put it on like level 3 for 8 hours. So every time I go to sleep, that bad boy is like, so I have the air conditioning and the aircon filter blowing cold air when my girlfriend and I are sleeping in this tower. Then right next to our heads, right when we sleep, for the 8-hour window that we're sleeping, I have this air purifier purifying the air that came into the air conditioner from outside, which is really polluted in Manila. So the air is like probably semi-polluted by the time it gets into our apartment, and then the air purifier purifies it, and then the purified air blows right up into our faces as we're sleeping. Yeah, I think that's just good advice, because you don't want to develop long-term conditions as a result of breathing bad air when you're sleeping. Another question you want to ask if you're going to buy or rent a condo in Manila, or anywhere really, but especially Manila, is there any construction going on in your building, the one that you're looking at investing in, like as of still, or any nearby one, because of noise? Because if you're renting out to like a tenant, for example, who works from home, perhaps like another foreigner, he's probably gonna want it to be quiet. When I first moved into this tower, I quickly discovered for the first month, the people living above me were doing a project. They were renovating right above me, and I work from home, and I'm like, okay, this is a problem. So I went down to the administrative office, and I'm like, hey, you know, it's 7 a.m. and people are banging on hammers. You know, I need to sleep till 8 or 9 a.m. because that's my routine. And then they told me that, oh, they can only work from 10 to 12 and 2 to 5 or whatever. I'm like, okay, can you let them know that? And they're like, yeah, we'll tell them. So they did, and then, okay, finally. But they're still banging hammers 10 to 12 and 2 to 5 for the first month, which is fine. So just that's, I didn't ask that to my landlord. I don't know if that my landlord would have known anyways, but that's just something that's good to know. Okay, especially if you're gonna buy a condo, but this also makes sense if you're gonna like look at renting a condo. Is the building built upon the fault line, meaning at high risk of an earthquake? So throughout the main island, where throughout the main capital region where Manila is, the main island, there is a fault line that I will show on the screen right now. And right through that fault line, if you're thinking about buying a condo or renting a condo on that fault line, you certainly still can. Just understand that if that area is at a higher risk of having a far more dangerous, horrifying earthquake. Will it ever happen? I have no idea. The probability is probably low, but you never know. If you're someone who really takes natural disasters into account, you might not want to buy a condo or rent a condo in that place. It's just, especially when there's so many other options, but it's completely up to you. If you're going to buy a condo, you want to ask your real estate agent to verify whether or not you can Airbnb the place from the condo. That way, if you ever want to leave your condo and if you're not in a position to sell it yet and you want to rent it on Airbnb, you can make a lot more money than if you do long-term rental. So ask the person you're buying from if the developer allows, can you Airbnb the place, can you do long-term renting, and can you rent to foreigners? 3 questions you want to ask. Can you rent to foreigners, can you do long-term, and can you do short-term? Because sometimes you cannot. This is the Philippines. So sometimes some developers will be like, no, you cannot do Airbnb. Or like, no, you cannot do long-term renting. You can only do Airbnb. And some like, no, you can only rent to locals, not foreigners. Because it's the Philippines. So don't buy a condo assuming you can do whatever you want with it in this country, okay? Or any country for that matter. But I did talk to someone who I find very reliable, who's super professional at her job. She did tell me Mega World developers, the Mega World developer who pretty much developed all of the VGC area, Fort Bonifacio, Uptown Bonifacio, High Street, Central Bonifacio. Mega World pretty much does allow and has no problem with, from what I've heard, Airbnb, okay? So that's one bit of information for you. Okay, yeah, and just to recap, if you want to live in the capital regions of the Philippines, like Manila or surrounding areas, or somewhere else like in Quezon City, which is a little bit cheaper, I believe. Yeah, just to reiterate, as I said earlier in this video, it's great if you have a vaccine card, not necessary, but it's very convenient if you do have one. If you have a driver's license here, it's not necessary, but it's very convenient for yourself if you have one. You don't need a different visa. You don't need a residence permit or a work visa, which are like upgraded visas, which allow you to do cool stuff that you can't do with a tourism visa. You don't need one, they're unnecessary, but again, that's just a third benefit to make your quality of life here higher and more convenient if you want to get that. Getting a local bank account will make it easier to rent and give you the option to buy a condo if you want. Again, you don't need a local bank account to live here in Philippines, long-term or short-term, but it could make your life easier and more fun if you want a bank account for those reasons. You can't really get a Gcash or a PayMaya. I don't think it's hard to verify those apps on your phone if you are a foreigner with a foreign passport, but you may be able to get those verified on a tourism ACR card, which is what you get after you renew your tourism visa for the first time. But yeah, so it's nice to have those two apps as well, and that isn't just one last thing that will help you. So this has been Justin Spencer. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you're still here with me, thank you so much. So 80% of the individuals who watch my channel are not subscribed, 20% are. Thank you to the 20%. If you got value out of this video and you want to form a friendship with me, a connection with me, I know I talk really fast. I try to slow it down. I talk fast when I'm explaining something because I get excited. But at any rate, if you want to be a part of everything that I do, please hit the subscribe button. And if you want to be extra super cool, consider hitting the bell notifications so I can stay directly in touch with you when I publish, which is pretty much every day. All right, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll catch you on the other ones. Thank you so much again. Bye for now.